What's up, guys? Ryan here again. Gonna do another Think, Learn, and Be Vulnerable vlog, and have to talk about an executive order that just went out today. It is about removing contracts for-profit prisons. Um, I think this is really, really, really good and really, really, really big, and I'll tell you why. I think one of the problems that most people see and think is I'm not a criminal, so people that are criminals should be criminalized and should go to jail, and et cetera, et cetera. Um, and they're like, I follow the law, so I shouldn't go to jail. Should be no problem. If you're following the law, it's no big deal. The problem is, though, um, when we talk about systemic racism, I'll give you a very general, brief example, but this is kind of how it works. Mm, Typically, poor neighborhoods, which unfortunately typically have a higher number of Black and Latino and Indigenous people of color in them, they get more heavily policed. The reason they get more heavily policed is, unfortunately, a policy that Bill Clinton put in, bringing another 150,000 cops to the streets and to quote unquote more dangerous criminal neighborhoods. Now, I realize that most of the people that live there are poor. That doesn't necessarily mean they're more criminal. However, if you are really poor, sometimes crime is the only way to get out of your particular situation. So you put more cops into places that are more likely to have crime because of poor conditions, not necessarily because of racial conditions. Um, then you put a bunch of judges in place who, unfortunately, are, let's face it, a little racist. And they put bigger and longer sentences onto people that aren't white. And hence, you're going to have people in prisons that are typically going to be people of color more and more into jails. And they're in there for longer. Now, imagine if prisons got paid government subsidies for keeping numbers of prisoners. And then imagine that people own those prisons and were able to spend less on the prisoners' care than they were getting from the government. Hence, you have a thing that's called for-profit prisoning, for-profit prisons. Basically, the government subsidizes these prisons, and the more people that are in it, the more money they get. And if they can spend less than the government is giving them, then they make money. So people started buying up prisons and telling the government, hey, you can store your prisoners here instead of having to build and fund their own facilities, which are obviously more expensive and are held to higher standards. And they became fairly regular. And there were people that were literally making money off of this. So then what do those people do? They turn around and start putting in policies and lobbying for stricter laws, more aggressive policing, policing on more minor offenses. They start lobbying judges to give harsher penalties. And so look, it all cycles, right? This is how systemic racism is really screwed up. I don't think this is news though. I'm not saying anything new to a lot of people. I'd like to think most people know about this by now. But you can see how difficult it is to get out of that, because if you make one mistake, you're stuck and you're a criminal for life. Meanwhile, these people are literally profiting off your, one mistake. And a lot of times it's not even a mistake. Sometimes it's a mistake. Sometimes it's just an overzealous cop who decides to lock you up. And then you get an overzealous judge and they put you away. The problem is, though, is that this keeps happening. Arrest rates for people of color are 2.5, 3 times the same amount as it is for white people. Number of times they get shot, way more than that too, because obviously they're going to be, you know, even if cops weren't using excessive force, the sheer fact that they're arresting more people of color means that more of those people of color are going to be put in jail and are going to be shot. This is why it's systemic. It's just happening more often to people of color. Now, there are a lot of people out there who would say that the people of color deserved it, but also they're being over policed. If you had 4 times the amount of police in your neighborhood, you'd be more likely to get arrested and put in jail. And that's really the point, is this is how the system catches these people. So what did Joe Biden do today? He signed an executive order that says all contracts with for-profit prisons will not be renewed. Now, that's not getting rid of the contract, which would be a giant clusterfuck. I get it. You have to figure out where the hell to put these prisoners now that they're there. I don't know. Maybe release some of them, or move them to more government-run facilities, or convert these for-profit prisons into, frankly, more expensive, which is unfortunate, but better run and better for rehabilitation. So, I mean, it's good. I would love for it to be gone now, but it does mean that, whenever these contracts do run out, they're not going to be renewed. And then these prisoners will have to be released because they're being held on federal charges. Now, the problem is it doesn't get rid of state-run prisons, but it's a step in the right direction. I appreciate what he's doing. Do I wish it was more? Yes, absolutely. It should be more. It absolutely should be more. But it's something. So, think, learn, and be vulnerable. Well, sometimes we need to think about how difficult it is for certain people and how we might actually have it easier than we think. And to not judge those people too harshly, because it's surprisingly easy to get arrested for something. And it's surprisingly easy to get put in jail and have a judge just say, book, throw, here you go. And what can we learn from this? Well, I think we need to learn that we shouldn't be demonizing people as much as we have been, because the system is a lot more systemic and set up to affect people of color than we might think. Excuse me. And how can we be vulnerable? Maybe we are part of the problem. And then maybe our views on our Black, Indigenous, persons of color, Latinos, basically everybody else who isn't white, perhaps we've been judging a little too harshly. Perhaps we need to realize that they are just humans too. I will freely admit I do not have all my labels correct, and I'm still trying to learn. And I will freely admit that as a half-white male, I've never feared for my life when a cop has put the cuffs on me. It's happened a couple of times. I'm still here. I'm survived. No worse for wear, even though it's shocking and scary. But I'm okay. I never thought they were going to beat me or kill me. Or I never thought a judge was going to throw the book at me. I'm all right. But that's the problem. I get to be all right. I get to be fine with it. That's really what privilege is. I may not know much about systemic racism and systemic issues, but I do understand when I'm privileged, and I do understand when I have it easier. And I do have it easier. And, no cop has looked at me like I was a serious threat. Whereas if you are a person of color and you are seen as a threat, you're far more likely to be targeted. whether that targeting results in your arrest and your incarceration or your death. It's just an unfortunate fact of life. And I really wish it wasn't. And this is a step in the right direction. But we need to all take it upon ourselves to step up and say, no, this is wrong. Let's treat others better. Thanks, guys.